was a terrible metallic impact. It sounded horrible. It was just this like heavily loaded, tensioned, screeching sound. And in fact, the people who were down below thought that we had lost the rig.
Check 1 2, check 1 2. Recording an intro from the salon in on Falcon at Vinda Marine in Sweden. Let's see how this sounds. All right, welcome back, friends. I'm your host, Andy. This is On the Wind. Got a podcast today from Emma with Lydia Mullan. It's a pretty dramatic one about Lydia was in the Bermuda race and their boat sank. I'm very excited to listen to this one. I read a story that was in Sail magazine. Lydia is one of the editors at Sail, and I actually asked Lydia to interview her, and she's like, no, I already did one with Emma. So Emma, good on you. You got to her first. Excited to listen to this one. In 59 North news, I'm recording this from the salon in Falcon at Vindo Marine, where we've been here for a week, and Vindo, the same boatyard that refit Eastbjorn twice, is installing these helm board leveling things on Falcon. If you've sailed Falcon, if you've seen Falcon, you'll know about the annoying triangles at the helm that you can prop your foot against when the boat's heeled over. Well, we're doing basically what the Volvo boats do, where there will be a platform at each helm wide enough to stand with a wide stance, and that platform is able to be leveled. So effectively, when you're steering at the windward helm, you'll always be standing on a flat surface. It's a super simple, super easy, elegant solution, inspired by our first mate, Alex, who used to work on Telefonica, a Volvo 70. So very excited to have that wrapped up and get the boat out sailing. Also, this weekend, if you're listening to this as it comes out, August 23, 24, and 25, Falcon's going to be in the Up at Varv boat show. That's at the Hallberg-Rassy production facility here on the island of Orust on the west coast of Sweden. So come to that. You can check it out, meet Mia and myself, see this refit I just talked about on Falcon, tour the rest of the boat, meet some of our friends and crew members who are sailing with us, and see Mia and I speak on the Friday night. We're the guest lecturers at Hallberg-Rassy's annual dinner on Friday night. You have to buy tickets for that, but if you go to our website, 59-north.com/Hallberg-Rassy, you will be able to see a link there to buy them, also on our social media. So hope to see some of our Swedish friends there. I know a few people that are going to be coming down. I'm excited to meet any new people that we haven't met yet. So come see Falcon and hear Mia and I speak at the Hallberg-Rassy Up at Varv boat show this coming weekend. Besides that, August is getting ready for the last trip of the year on Eastbjorn. I think the crew joined him today on Saturday as I record this. And Falcon's got 2 trips left before our off-season in Lagos. So hard to believe we've done so much work over the last 2 years to get this boat where we are now. Falcon sailed 30,000 miles in that span since we built the boat. And season 2 is winding down. And season 3, we're headed to the Pacific. So lots ahead, exciting stuff. Lots of fun guests coming up on the podcast. I feel a renewed sense of focus, having been on my own boat, Spica, for the summer and not really been online much, which has been super fun. So enjoying the time here at 59 North, and I hope to see a lot of you guys that are listening at boat shows or actually out sailing with us. Check out 59-north.com/bunks to see what we have available next year and the year after on both boats. And stay tuned for more from me on Spica. I promised I'd be running some passages on her, and I will indeed. I will indeed. That's after a refit coming up this winter at Vindo here again, our favorite boatyard in Sweden. All right, friends, I'm back next week with an interview I did with Skip Novak. Look forward to that, and I'll see you then. Until next time, hold fast.
On the Wind is sponsored by 59 North's very own Quarterdeck. The Quarterdeck is a membership website and 59 North's home port on the internet. We post videos and articles and host live streams and all sorts of fun on there, and we have a very knowledgeable community that you can be part of. Go to 59-north.com/quarterdeck and sign up today for a 2-week free trial. Becoming a Quarterdeck member is also a great way to support what we do so that we can continue to make free sailing content such as this very podcast. So thanks to everyone who signs up. Hope to see you there.
You're listening to On the Wind, the podcast about sailing. I'm your host, Emma Garshagen. Lydia Mullan is a sailor, journalist, and onboard reporter. She is the managing editor at Sail magazine and was the social media manager behind Cole Brauer's recent Global Solo Challenge campaign. She was aboard the vessel Alliance in this year's Newport to Bermuda race when they struck an object and had to abandon ship in the Gulf Stream. In this episode, we talk about that accident and their subsequent rescue, as well as Lydia's career as a sailing journalist. What is your relationship to sailing? Like, how did it start? How has it evolved?
Yeah, so I grew up sailing dinghies, but I don't come from a sailing family. So it was sort of a summer camp situation. I was an instructor when I was in high school. And because I didn't know any adults that sailed, I sort of had this idea in my head that once I graduated high school, that was kind of the end of the line. The college I was going to didn't have a sailing team. And so in my mind, if I wanted to be a writer, I would never be able to afford to go sailing. And so it was a little bit of a weird thing. And I had swam in high school as well. And so I swam in college, and that was kind of my sport going on. But at some point during college, I was watching the ocean race 2014, 2015. And I had this sort of aha moment. I knew I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to take photos and do video work. And I saw the media coming off of those boats, and I had this sort of aha moment of like, oh, that's what I should do. Like, that's where I should be. And I remember going to my career counselor's office, and it was sort of a joke with my family because my sisters, one of them is in computer science, one of them is a doctor. And so they have like very practical careers. My dad's an engineer, my mom's a landscape architect. So they all like have some like math and science components to what they're doing. And oh, Lydia wants to go, take photos of sailboats. And it was a little bit of a joke. But then I was talking to this career counselor, and I was like, this is like, seems so amazing to me. And she was like, well, how do you get there? And it was the first time anyone had sort of talked about my dream in a way that was like, okay, well, what do you do about that?
That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she like took it seriously. She wasn't just like, oh, like, I don't know.
Yeah. It was just different because I think I hadn't even really taken it seriously until she had asked that question. Then I started thinking like, okay, well, when that application opens up, what skills do you need to be at the top of the pile? And then how do I take jobs and volunteer opportunities, internships and things in the meantime to be at the top of that pile when those applications come in next time? And so I did a couple other things through college. I worked at Consumer Reports, which is another magazine, which was amazing. I loved working there. And then about 6 months after I graduated, the then editor-in-chief of Sail called me up and said, hey, we're going to be looking for someone. Do you want to apply? And I was like, absolutely. They were based in Salem at the time, and my family's in the Boston area. So I was really glad to be able to move back to Massachusetts, and sort of a Cinderella moment. Like, just
and did they was it like you had a connection to Sail or to the previous editor, or was it like your name came up in a?
Yeah. So what had happened was in my sort of career searching at the end of school and just trying to like know more about what I would need to do in order to be ready for that job if it came around someday. I had kind of cold emailed a bunch of people who work in sailing media, and I was just like, hey, can you talk to me about your job or your company or the work that you do? How do you prepare for it? What gear do you use? And I'm not the most extroverted person, but that kind of networking and being able to talk to people, I mean, they were very forthcoming about, their lives and their paths and all these different things about the industry. And so I had a conversation with him at that point, and he was like, hey, send over your resume and, I'll just hang on to it. And then like 3 weeks later, he was calling me up, and I was moving home. So
that's cool. That's such a good, like, I don't know, reminder of the like, just talk to people, and you never know what's going to come out of it. And like, I feel like my 59 North job sort of happened like that, where I wasn't like applying for a job directly with them. I was just like, trying to learn more about the industry and like see what opportunities were out there. And then it turned into a full-time job. Because my timing was good, and I put my name out there, and
it's true. And I think a lot of people who want to go into media things and want to be a writer or something, they think, oh, if I'm a generalist, then I'll be able to apply for the most number of jobs. Whereas because I had something so specific that I was interested in doing, I was actually the only person qualified for that job when it, of the graduating class of people, that could have been looking at that time, and in that area and all of those other things. And I think
cool. Was that something you knew you were doing, or was that just sort of how it happened?
I think I knew where I wanted to end up. And I think I would have taken a different writing job maybe if it came up. I mean, I did love working at Consumer Reports, so I think it would have been very hard to pry me away from that for anything other than the dream. But I think the then editor-in-chief, Pete Nielsen, he used to say that it's a lot easier to teach a sailor how to write than a writer how to sail. Yeah. And so I think that kind of went into that decision-making process for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And how much was sailing a part of your life, like as you got started at Sail Magazine and were leaving school?
Yeah. So I think the summer between my junior and senior year, I had started racing with a J122 team in Buzzards Bay. And we were doing sort of day racing on Saturdays, and I was living in New York at the time, so I would take like a bus to a train to a bus to my parents picking me up in the middle of the night, and then 2-hour drive down to Buzzards Bay, and this massive commute to get there to sail with them, because it was the only access I had. I mean, it was the only group of like adult boating people that I knew of, and they had pulled my name off of like a crew finder message board and just asked me to come along, and the rest was kind of history. But that's most of what I was doing in the early days, was kind of just jumping on with them. And then once I got the job at the magazine, that had all sorts of opportunities to go visit different people and sail on their boats. So that really broadened my horizons in terms of just what was out there for different kinds of sailing, different kinds of boats, and who was doing all of that stuff.
Yeah, and then as now, how long have you been at Sail Magazine now?
Around 6.5 years.
Okay, cool. And so and now you're the managing editor, which is like, as from what I understand, is like sort of and maybe this isn't true for Sail, but what I understand is you're kind of like the first mate of the magazine. Is that?
Yeah. That's accurate. Yeah, Wendy's the editor-in-chief. She's the captain, and I'm her right-hand man.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. That's sort of how I've understood it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So over that period of time, like how has your job evolved there, and like, what does it look like now?
Yeah. So I've definitely taken on a lot of different responsibilities over the time I've been there. So in the beginning, there was a lot of like learning and just doing kind of the administrative tasks of the office and things like that. And we don't even have an office anymore. So some of that just, went away by happenstance. But I am the editor of our special issue, which is multi-hull power and sail. So it's like a catamaran, trimaran special issue that we do twice a year. And so I'm responsible for that. I read everything and edit everything that goes in every issue. So basically, it'll come in, and Wendy or I will take it and kind of put it into the format that we need it, and we'll pass it off to the other one, and we read it, and then pass it back and forth. We send it out for a layout, comes back, we read it again. So we're pretty hands-on with every single thing that comes in. And we both write for the magazine a good amount as well. So we have our own sections that we're responsible for, and then we also do features, and it's a lot of moving parts, to be honest, but a lot of them are really interesting, and we get to talk to some really interesting people, and go out and have different adventures and sail different boats. So it's really a dream job. It's really something that I'm so happy to be doing.
Yeah. And I feel like I didn't really understand that, like, sailing, like, I think I just sort of was like, okay, a sailing magazine, you're writing about sailing, you're not actually doing the sailing. If you, like, I sort of assumed that was not part of your job. But that's cool to hear that. Yeah. Like, what does it look like when you're actually, like, going out sailing as part of your job?
Yeah. So it depends. So sometimes there'll be like a feature that we're writing on a specific program. And so we'll go and spend a week with that program, and kind of getting to know them and how they run it and their boat, and so we can talk about that. But then also we have our top 10 best boats competition every year. So someone from our team will sail on every single new boat that comes out every single year, that kind of fits into the racer cruiser category for, consumer markets. And so that also is a lot of sailing, and we try to spend more time on those boats if possible. But sometimes it's kind of an afternoon on the boat. Sometimes it's a delivery on the boat. And so there are different kinds of opportunities that the manufacturers make available to us, so that we can, try out those things. But then also a lot of our personal sailing. So like, my offshore sailing, or some of the things that Wendy's doing down in Annapolis. Also, stories come from that, and you meet people doing that. And so, It's a little bit of everything. Yeah, it's quite a lot of different things.
That's really neat. And then, like, I guess in addition to working at Sail, you also are doing some offshore racing on the side. You also were working closely with Cole Brauer while she was doing her around the world campaign with Global Solo Challenge. That's right, and I also, you're a Magenta mentee right now. Like, you've got like a lot of irons in the fire. So like, what else? I don't know. I guess what else do you want to say about like all the other things that you do?
It's been a very busy year for me, for sure. So actually the working with Cole is funny because I think because people assume that because we're in the same area and a similar age, we were friends beforehand. But actually, I met her because I had written an article about her for the magazine. And at the end of that interview, I was sort of like, hey, if you ever need help with any of your media stuff, let me know. And at the time, she had another media person who was doing that job. And he had left the project shortly before the start. And so she called me maybe 5 days before the start of the race. And I was on a delivery at the time. And I was like in the forward cabin and I like couldn't hear her. And I was on the phone and she was like, hey, like, would you want to help me out? I'll take whatever you can offer at this point. And I was like, I'm not sure you're asking what I think you're asking, but if it is, yes, I'll, whatever you need. And I logged into all of her accounts for the first time on the day that she left Spain. So it was a very trial by fire experience. I had never managed any sort of social media like that before. But Cole and I both come from families that are not sailors. And I think there was this idea that we wanted to create something that our parents would understand, and that they would be able to, even though she's talking about something that are quite technical and she's facing all of these challenges on board that sometimes require quite a lot of expertise to deal with. We wanted to make it accessible, and we wanted to make sure that even if she's talking about it in a technical way, there was a caption that explained it in a way that wasn't, or that someone was responding to all of the comments that had questions, asking what was going on or to explain something. And I think we had a really good working relationship because of that. We had these sort of similar goals for it, but also she's so bubbly, she's so high energy, and just such a wonderful person. And I am a more serious and subdued person. I think we would both agree. And I think we balance each other out nicely because I have the sort of understanding of what sales audience and what the sailing audience expects from their media. And I think I was quite aware that she might come across as like, a young woman who's having a lot of fun out there, but maybe people wouldn't take her as seriously because of that. And I think, we're quite careful in the way that, it seems like it was all a lot of fun and very off the cuff. And it certainly was. I wasn't at any point, some sort of filter between her and her audience. But there's also this awareness that we needed to back it up with the more traditional journalism route. So we were writing press releases. We were talking to different magazines. At the end, it was, TV news crews. There are different of the more traditional media side of things, different people that we were working with in order to make sure that she didn't turn into like a flash in the pan social media celebrity, and instead she could really use this to launch the next stage of her career.
That's amazing. that seems, I mean, it does from the outside. It looks like it just like, it looked very seamless from the outside. And it seems like, it did work out well, but like that must have been so much work, and like trying to figure it out as she's also actively racing around the world. Like that must have been pretty wild.
Yeah, there were a couple scary days in the mix there where she was having power generating problems, and so she had to be offline for a little while. And whenever she goes offline, I get 100 messages that are like, "Where is she? We haven't heard from her in 18 hours." And you're like, "Calm down." Like, like her priority right now is not responding to the comments on Instagram.
Yeah, you did such a good job explaining that. I think, like, I remember watching that while it was happening, and I mean, I understand that from being an offshore sailor, but I thought, you translated it really well, and just like we're still giving giving the people like content and entertainment and like and updates, and like you're giving constantly, because there are more and more people watching and asking questions. But like, yeah, you were also just like professional and we're like, this is what has to happen and this is the reason why. And like her job is not to like always be posting for you guys.
Yeah, I think it's hard to impress upon people who have never spectated an offshore race before, that when they are commenting on her video, it's like the equivalent of pulling up in a car next to somebody who's like at mile 22 in a marathon and being like, have a great day, and like she doesn't respond to you and you're upset about that. And it's like, I appreciate that this audience had such a deep connection with her and felt that they knew her so well and had this very like candid relationship with her. I mean, it's amazing that she was able to reach out to so many people in that way, but it also, I think, gave the sense that she was readily accessible and that, she was superhuman and able to be a regular social media star as well as a full-time 24 hours a day, 7 days a week athlete.
Insane,
which is a lot to do at the same time.
Yeah. And did working on that campaign make you want to do more things like that, or did it like what did that sort of teach you about what you want to do?
Yeah, it's funny because I definitely wanted to get more into like campaign media, because what I do typically is interfacing with the people who are in my role with Cole and, asking them for photos or press releases or whatever it is. So I'm usually on the opposite side of that conversation. And so I think, so this time last year, or maybe this time 18 months ago, I didn't know any other sailors that were within the 25 years of my age. I didn't have any peer group in the sailing world. And then I started offshore sailing with this team that had a bunch of young people on it. And I met Cole and her team, and that has a bunch of young folks. And that the energy in those team environments is quite high. And I was really excited to be involved in a team like that. And so I think it did encourage me to want to be involved with more projects like that in the future. Obviously, with wanting to do onboard reporting for a race like the Ocean Race someday, there's a strong drive to be involved with more campaign media. The social media side of it is definitely a bear, though, and not that I wouldn't do it again, but I was very glad to have a break from it when she finished the race.
Yeah, I mean, because you're even on your own social media, you're very good at it, but it also you're a writer and you're like writing and Instagram are like very different things. You're
very different mediums, and I would say there's nothing in the world to me more embarrassing than like standing at an event and holding my phone out in front of me and being like, hi, I'm Lydia and welcome to Barcelona, where it's like I hate the faux influencer, and it's like some people are so good at that, but it takes me 100 takes to get one that's postable, and I struggle with that so much. It's tough, it's a lot. So glad Cole's so good at it, because I could not be doing it every day.
Exactly. Cool. So now I want to talk about your Newport Bermuda race this year. And I was like reading some of your articles and like looking back on some other things that you've done, and saw that your first offshore race was on the same boat just a year ago.
Yes, that's right.
It's amazing. It feels like, I that surprised me, I think, just because I associate you with sailing, with offshore sailing, like seeing that you were on doing the Newport Bermuda race was like not surprising to me. So I was surprised that you only did your first offshore race a year ago. And it sounded like that one was also challenging, but not quite in the way that this one was. So do you want to talk a little about your first race on this boat and like what that boat and team is? And then we can talk about how this year went.
For sure, yeah. So Alliance is a J122, and they have a very eclectic group of people that sail on it in some ways. So they have a wide range of ages, and there are men and women who race on it both. And quite a lot of them, as it happens, are engineers and military adjacent. And so that's kind of one of the through threads, but it also really impacts the team culture in some ways, because I think there's a strong sense of responsibility, and the priorities on the boat are managing it in a certain way. And I think that's been really helpful in some of the sticky situations that we've gotten into, just because there's this sense of like, when something goes wrong, there's a sense of urgency, but there's never any panic on the boat. There's always like a plan, and there's a to-do list. And I think you kind of go straight into fix it mode instead of freak out mode, which has been pretty amazing to get to watch now twice on the boat. The first one, Annapolis Newport, it was a pretty rough Annapolis Newport, and I believe by the end of that first night, a pretty significant portion of the fleet had retired, just because the sea state was pretty crazy. We were seeing, I don't want to get this wrong, but I think we were seeing gusts of up to 30 knots, and I think I had
it was
never
even
seen
35.
35.
Yeah. I was just looking at your article.
I didn't want to overestimate, but yeah.
I know you don't want to be the guy that's like the waves.
I went 50 knots my first night out. It's like no.
About 30, 35 knots. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like on your way out of the Chesapeake, right?
Yeah.
Really.
It was and it was quite gusty, and I had never seen that sort of those conditions. And I was sailing with people that I hadn't really spent a ton of time with. We'd done a few smaller races and prep days and things like that, but it was all new to me at that point. And I was off watch and sort of woke up to Lindsay Gimple, who is a phenomenal offshore sailor who had an Olympic campaign that she was racing in this past year, and she had really helped me kind of feel comfortable on that boat with all of the things that were going on. And I woke up to her saying something like in a sort of a slightly stressed out voice, and like rushing by my bunk, and like there was some chatter, and I sort of looked up and I was like, Lindsay, do you need anything? And she was like, well, you could start bailing if you wanted to. And I was like, bailing does not sound like an if you want to situation on a boat
like getting the water out of the boat.
Yeah, it's not a priority, but and I was like immediately awake. And I like had sort of asked her, and I was like, oh, like what panel, do you take out to get to the bilge, whatever, because I wasn't quite as familiar with the boat at that point. And she like kind of looked at me funny, and I looked over the lead cloth at the floor, and she's like ankle deep in water. There's so much water sloshing around in the boat. And so of course I go back and grab the bucket. And what happened was there had been a repair in the anchor locker, and the gel coat hadn't quite cured properly, and so it had chipped off and clogged the drain in the anchor locker. So the anchor locker filled up, and then it was sort of spitting back in through the bowsprit, because that's not a watertight gasket. And so we just had this kind of water coming in. It took a little while to figure out exactly what was going on there, because we knew it was coming in from the front, but the sail stack was in the way, and it was
and like everyone's seasick, and
everyone was seasick,
like like it's just, but that situation resolved. Like you guys figured out where the water was coming from, you were able to get it out of the boat, you kept racing, people sort of like came out of their seasickness, and like that ended well, like, or that ended with you guys finishing the race.
Exactly. And I think we were second and third in our division. So it was actually like a positive ending, where we were all like, okay, actually, it felt bad in the moment, but once we got through that, it was okay. And I think it also gave us an opportunity to like get to know each other a little bit better. Like there's a trust that you place in all of your teammates out there, and having the opportunity to see people when they're stressed out and exhausted and wet and cold and tired and all of those other things, like really teaches you a lot about them. And
you bond quickly.
And teaches you how to rely on them, and who needs a little bit more support in certain instances, or who needs a certain kind of support, or whatever it is. And I think that instance where we had this sort of stressful moment of figuring out how to set up the pumps and how to keep the boat going during the Annapolis Newport was actually quite helpful when the Newport Bermuda rolled around this year, because I think, as I've mentioned before, I mean, it's a program that is extraordinarily well run, and the boat is extremely well maintained, and I think we had every reason to expect that it would be a challenging but successful race. And that obviously was not the case.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about this? So then you come back to race this boat, Alliance in Newport, Bermuda this year. Did you have a role on board? Were you like...
Yeah, so I'm the lead bow person.
Okay.
Which is a job that I took over, I think, mid-season last year. So I had been doing it for Ida Lewis and also Marblehead Halifax last year. So I've done...
Can you describe that role? Like what your job is in that role?
So everybody on the boat does a little bit of everything. So like at night, everybody drives, everybody trims, we rotate because it just gets exhausting out there. But if there's something that's needed up on the bow, I am the farthest person forward with the biggest waves. And every time we do sail changes, everything needs to get hooked up or taken down or flaked and put below. And so I'm kind of the person who's making sure all of that happens up front. Yeah, I think it's the wettest job on the boat. I think sometimes when the wind is a little bit unpredictable, it can be one of the most physically labor-intensive jobs on the boat.
Right, you're changing head sails. You're like,
Sometimes it's a lot of weight to be moving around, and sometimes you just change it, and then 10 minutes later, it's like, actually, let's switch to something else. So it can be quite labor-intensive, and I think I like it because it's quite adventurous, and there's a lot of kind of challenging bits of figuring out just the puzzle of all the lines up there and how to hook them up and to make sure everything gets where it needs to go properly. So it's something I quite like, but on the colder races, it's really chilly to be wet all the time. Yeah, that's my only gripe.
Yeah, fair enough. So okay, so you guys set off, and this Newport Bermuda was in June?
Yeah, end of June.
Okay. So yeah, can you talk about that race and like the sort of arc of like you start the race and sort of then what happens?
Yeah, so we set out around 3 p.m. on a Friday, and I think the projected finishes for most people were on Tuesday. So it's a couple days out there, and we were doing fine going in. We had a really light air spot the first day, but the second day we were kind of cruising, and by the time you get to the afternoon on the second day out there, you start to see the Gulf Stream, or at least we did based on where it was positioned when we were out there. And it's got quite a unique localized culture with localized weather pattern with these clouds that you can see, because they sort of gather over the Gulf Stream the same way that they would gather over shore because it's warmer. And it's quite cool to see from a ways off. And so we were kind of chasing down this line of clouds trying to get to the Gulf Stream, and we had sort of our planned entrance point and exit point. And we reached the entrance point around 10 p.m. I was off watch at that 10 p.m., but I was just so mesmerized by this cloudscape because it was also the same day as the Strawberry Moon was like a full moon, or maybe the full moon was the day before. Well, yeah. But it was so beautiful because it was these really, really dense clouds, but they were sort of little individualized pockets, and so the moon would dip behind the clouds and then come back out, and then and it was like someone was turning the lights on and off all night. And it was really beautiful.
And what were your conditions like? Like, were you were you downwind, upwind? What was happening?
We were not quite beating, but we were definitely more beating than running. And it wasn't super sloppy, but by the time I was up for my next watch, when we were fully in the stream, I was seeing the waves regularly break the horizon, and I'm about 5 feet tall, and I was standing on the high side, and so I would guess around 7 feet waves mostly. And it was, I think our boat speed when we were surfing down, I think we were seeing kind of max of 12 for our SOG, and I think so it's quick. I mean, we were moving, but we had the current with us, and it was a little bit challenging driving, but like the fun kind of challenging. It wasn't overwhelming or anything, and I think we had quite a balanced sail plan. So when I was on the helm, I didn't feel like we were out of control at all. It was sort of the sleigh ride sort of, fun driving.
Right, it's like full moon, you're going fast. It's like, that sounds, it's fun.
Yeah, and I remember when I came on at 2 a.m., because of the conditions, I had sort of been like, oh, can we do short shifts? Just because the previous watch had mentioned that it was pretty exhausting driving. And the watch captain, Connor, he was like, yeah, for sure. How long do you want to do? And I was like, let's do half hours. And we got to 2:30 and he was like, all right, how you doing? And I was like, give me 10 more minutes.
Like half hours on the helm.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
And so I was like, give me 10 more minutes. And he was like, great. And I did my 10 more minutes. And he was like, how you doing? And I was like, give me 10 more. Because it was just so beautiful out there. And I was sort of in a rhythm. And it was between that second 10 minutes and what, I probably would have asked for a third 10 minutes, but that we sort of surfed down a wave and there was something waiting for us in the trough of the wave. And I don't want to speculate about what it was, but it was a terrible metallic impact. It sounded horrible. It was just this like heavily loaded, tensioned, screeching sound. And in fact, the people who were down below thought that we had lost the rig because it was just such a loud, intense noise. And I think it was just, kind of a heart-stopping moment, but we all immediately...
Did the boat stop? Like when you're at the helm, you're holding the helm, like what did you see and what did it feel like?
So I think one of the things that I remember most clearly, and it's some bits are kind of a blur and some bits are super clear in my memory because it was all happening at the same time, but I remember the rudder felt wrong, like the wheel didn't have quite enough tension on it, and I was like, did we, was it the rudder chain? Was it a sail issue where we don't have power anymore, so the rudder's being weird? And it took a minute to sort of look around and figure out exactly what I thought was going on, because what I was feeling was the rudder. And other people, I think immediately, the other people on deck, I think immediately knew that it was something we'd hit. But for me, I was like just sort of thrown into the wheel. In fact, I was thrown into the wheel so hard that I put a dent in it.
You put a dent in the helm? In the wheel itself?
Yeah. And I hadn't really realized that it just wasn't something that had registered to me in the moment because there was so much else going on. But then afterwards, someone was like, oh, did you check out your ribs? Are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. What are you talking about? And they were like, you did some damage to the
wheel. Yeah. And bent it or something?
Yeah, bent it.
Wow.
Which is pretty crazy. Yeah, it's wild because I didn't even really it didn't even register in the moment.
Yeah.
But I was fine.
Yeah.
We think maybe it was the canister in my life jacket or something took most of the impact, because I think I would have been pretty badly banged up if it was my physical body that had been the first thing to make contact. So we sort of just we just went into fix-it mode. We pulled the jib down. The people down below went to go assess the damage and to get the pumps out. I think they quickly realized that we were going to lose the boat. There was someone down below, our person in charge, who is a former submarine captain, and he, is very involved with the maintenance of the boat himself, and very just competent at figuring out how to fix things, and especially a water ingress situation. I mean, that's a worst case scenario on a submarine. And he took a look at it and he was like, trying to assess the situation. And the boat's co-owner, Mary Martin, was at the nav station at the time, and she was like, Eric, am I calling for a ponton or a mayday? And he was like, call for a mayday.
Wow.
And I think, it was the moment it became real for a lot of people. When they heard that, I mean, that's something you never want to hear. Yeah. And independently, Bill Neller, who's our technical person who's done a lot of the maintenance on the boat as well, was looking at the rudder compartment from above. And he made the same assessment. He sort of looked back and was like, Eric, be prepared to lose the boat. And Eric was like, yeah, I know.
Just because there was so much water coming in, or the hole was so big, or both, or...
Yeah, and so the problem was that we had hit the rudder with such a catastrophic impact that it had ripped the rudder bearings out, but the rudder post was still in the hole. And so it was bashing around, and there was no real way to stop the water ingress at that point, because typically you could put your collision mat over a hole of that size, or you could patch it with something, or at least put something on top of it to slow down the water ingress. But because there was something so heavily loaded still through the hole, there was no real way to manage that, I think.
Right. And if you'd been able to like stuff it full of something, then you don't have a rudder either. Like you're just sort of, And
there's no way to stabilize the rudder at that point, because we had done so much damage to the grid. And so it was...
sorry, what do you mean by the grid?
Like the grid that everything's mounted in.
Okay.
And there's no watertight bulkhead on a J122. There's, even if we had been able to stop the water from coming into the rest of the boat, there was no real way to steer the boat after that. I mean, I know you can put out a drogue and sort of figure out your way from there, but even that, I mean, I'm not the person to speculate about this. I'm not like, a naval engineer or anything like that, but it seems like it was clear to the people who do know about these things better than I do that there was not a lot we could have done to save her.
Yeah, and pretty immediately clear. Like, was this was all? Yeah. I'm assuming this is one of those situations where everything's sort of happening at once. Like, you hit something, people are assessing, the jib's coming down. Like, how quickly is all this stuff happening?
Yeah, so all of that happened very, very quickly. I would say within the first, 5 to 10 minutes. But we got our pumps up and running. We had 4,000 gallons per hour of pumping capacity. Some of that's required by the race organization. And we had fortunately had our opportunity to practice the previous year with getting those running. And that bought us a little bit more time. And the plan was basically to stay on the boat as long as we could until we knew that help was in the immediate vicinity. And so we had an opportunity to go down and like get license, credit cards, our phones, passports were already in the ditch bag. So we had kind of a few moments to pack up our things before we were kind of preparing to get off the boat. And we launched the life raft. And one thing is, because we were still moving and the main was still up, because we were trying to stabilize the boat so that the rudder wasn't bashing around even more in the sea state. The boat was still moving forward, but the drogues on the life raft were pulling it backwards. And so we had, people trying to like hold it close enough for other people to get into it. And that was probably for me, one of the most nerve-wracking things was like watching people like physically yanking it, because you hit a wave wrong and, potentially someone ends up between the life raft and the boat. And that's, like a worst case scenario there.
Yeah. And so the boat is still sailing forwards
slowly,
but in the sea state that you were describing before. It's still the middle of the night. It's still dark out.
Still dark.
Yeah. And you have an inflated life raft that you're trying to hold close to the boat because it's trying to go in the opposite direction from the boat, right? That's what.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Wow. and then also the 7-foot sea state. And so the life raft suddenly up, and then it's down, and then it's up and down. And
so you're like timing your everyone's entry. And
and I think we'd all taken our safety at sea courses and had all been in a life raft before because of that. But I don't know about everyone else's, but we climbed in from the water during mine, and I think that's typical. And stepping in from a boat is quite different. And I didn't realize this, but of the 9 people, I think all 9 of us fell while we were trying to get into the life raft, because you sort of step down like it's going to be a floor, but it's just a tarp on water. Like there's nothing solid there to step on. And so my word of caution is, if anyone's planning to ever potentially need to get in a life raft, just remember that like a little tumble might be part and parcel of that maneuver, and be careful, because like at that moment, the last thing you want to do is add more injuries to the mix.
And you had 9 people going into this raft. You had 9 people on board. Wow.
9 people on board.
And Yeah. And I mean, I've climbed in and out of life rafts in swimming pools, like in these courses, and you guys are doing it in like, yeah, what else? I don't know. Were there other things that like surprised you or felt wildly different or felt familiar? Like what did it feel like compared to the sort of training that you'd done?
I think in Safety at Sea, we had done it in like a 4-person one, and we'd sort of maxed out capacity. But being 9 people in a 10-person one with all of our emergency water and the gear that was sort of highest priority to bring with us, it was very close quarters. We were all kind of either in each other's laps or, had a mountain of gear on us. And I think we had only gotten in the life raft to do the transfer to the other boat. So it wasn't like we were sitting in there waiting for someone to come get us. The boat that had diverted to come pick us up, Kaylee, they were sort of right there by the time we were disembarking. So it wasn't like we were floating around in there forever.
Yeah. And you knew that you probably weren't going to be there. You weren't like getting in thinking, okay, we might be here for 3 days. Like you were,
right.
You had the other boat in sight coming to meet you. Okay.
And I think the good thing about being in a race when you're out there is that there's, 100 other boats on the same course as you within, a couple hours of where you are. And so, we were pretty sure, I mean, we had communicated with a number of them, before getting off Alliance. And so, we knew there were people close at hand, which was really lucky. Being in that life raft was not fun. It was very quiet, and I think people were. There was never any panic at any point during the maneuver, but I think just it was this like heavy, stony silence, and seeing your friends and your teammates in that situation is really tough. I mean, it's it's always going to be tough to be in that situation, but just to look around and see these people that you care about a lot and, and you trust and have been relying upon for your own safety for the past couple of days. It was just hard to emotionally at that point. I think that's the thing that I look back on and remember as being like, one of the heaviest moments.
Where it like kind of sinks in.
Yeah. And just seeing people that you know well and care about in a dangerous situation, in a situation where,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, it's like one of the worst things that could happen out there.
Totally. And it's suddenly happening. And
we were lucky because we were very prepared. But we were also just lucky.
Well, and that's, I mean, do you know if your teammates share, I don't know how much you guys have like talked about it since, but do you know if they shared that feeling with you? Like, I think it's interesting that the moment it was sinking in for you was not like, oh, this is happening to me, but this is happening to these people that I love. Like when you looked at their faces, you were able to see like, that's when it hit you.
I think part of it also is like the media training. While I was on the boat, there's some footage of all of this going down, especially from the life raft. It's quite intense. And I remember there was an onboard reporter in the ocean race who I had talked to a year or so ago about this, and it was when there were some dismastings in the ocean race, and I had asked him, what do you do when there's like an emergency on board? Like, what's your job as the onboard reporter? And he was like, listen, unless there is something that you can actively be doing that's going to keep someone out of danger or, something like that, you're there to tell the story. And just because it has a plot point that you weren't expecting doesn't mean your job is different.
Wow.
That kind of came back to me in that moment of like, keep the camera rolling. And as long as there's not something that you should be doing from like a safety standpoint, your job is to be there telling that story. And I think I was sort of experiencing it a little bit in the third person at that moment because I was, still at work doing my job. Which is,
wow.
Yeah, a little bit of a funny meta experience, I guess.
Yeah, but also makes sense. Did it feel, I don't know, while you were like in the life raft and filming, did that feel okay? Like, did that feel like, I mean, it's helpful that this onboard reporter had said this to you, but like, did it feel comfortable to be filming, or did your
No,
teammates seem comfortable like being filmed, or did they even notice? Like,
it was so uncomfortable because I was like, this feels like a really vulnerable moment that potentially like we will not want to look back on. And I remember when we were still on the boat, Eric had asked me to take some photos and videos for the insurance, because we had enough time. We were waiting for the other boat to get close to us. And so I know that they already knew that I was potentially going to have the cameras out. I think they all respected that I was at work still. I don't think anybody, there were a couple people that I was conscious of, that I was like, okay, I'm not going to point a camera in that person's direction while they seem to be, having some emotional experience that, not like someone was crying or something, but, they just, you don't want to be invasive about that sort of stuff. And I think I was trying to balance being conscientious of their experience with telling that story. And I think one thing I really don't want is people to see the footage of our disaster online and think that if they end up in a similar situation, they should take out their phone and start recording it. Because there's certainly, for insurance reasons or for, diagnostic reasons afterwards, having a log and a record can be super helpful. But that's only after all of the other things get taken care of first. And because there were 8 other people in that boat that were responsible for other jobs, I had the opportunity to do that. But I don't want people to think that should be the first thing that they're going to think about when that happens. I don't want to see a bunch more videos like this. Yeah. Because I think, so many people saw that footage and it's gotten way more traction than I ever expected it to. But I don't want people to think that that's like the normal thing that they should be doing, Yeah,
you were in a really unique role there and had the training. I don't know, like this is it's your job. It's not
like a professional at this. And,
no, you don't. Yeah, you don't want the influencers, like, I don't know. Yeah, like making it.
Yeah, it was like not manufactured drama. And I don't want other people to think that, I don't know, that I think that that's what they should be doing or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and I think the way that you shared it, you didn't like record like a voice, like I don't know. I'm trying to think of like, it's the way that you shared it is very intentional or feels very intentional. And you like wrote out like a very like helpful caption that explains what's going on. And you didn't add like crazy dramatic music and sound effects. And like I think you just were sharing the truth and the facts and what happened. And I think that's instructive, but it didn't feel like you were like sensationalizing it and making it seem like cooler than it was or something. Or, I think that's, I don't know, I noticed that.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I think in the age of social media where everybody has their own platform, it's especially important that we're responsible with how we report on these sorts of things. And I don't want anything bad to come out of this. I think there's a lot of teachable moments. I think we had a very successful rescue. Kaylee did an amazing job. All of their crew members were phenomenal about that whole rescue. And I would never want somebody to kind of hear about a snippet of what happened and not the full story and do something risky or
try to vlog their rescue.
Exactly.
I think, and I guess the other piece of so where we were is you guys you'd gotten into the life raft from your boat and left your boat behind, left Alliance behind, and then you were transferring to the other boat. How did that transfer can you like describe how that transfer went?
So they were about 2 miles downwind of us when they picked up our distress call. And so they came pretty much straight to us. And they had circled around a couple times to throw us a line. And it took 3 tries to actually get the line to our boat. And then they were, trying to haul it in. But of course, as they're doing this circle to try to get the line to us, they can't really, the guy at the helm can't really see us because we're so low and the sea state is so high. So half the time we're behind a wave, and then the other half of the time we're just this little like speck way out there. And you see the footage. Someone on their boat actually had their phone out to record it as well. And it's hard to watch because the life raft looks so small with those waves. And they eventually did get the line to us and were able to winch us in, but we were still dealing with that same sea state where we were kind of getting pulled in and out and in and out. And so we're bashing into the transom, and it actually popped one of the tubes on the life raft.
Wow.
Which is, I think none of us were really expecting at that point.
Yeah.
And they had two guys on the back who were basically just grabbing our tethers, hooking them on the back of the boat, and then yanking us out of the life raft. Wow. And it was sort of timed with the waves, so the life raft would kind of surf towards the transom, and then they would just grab someone. Wow. And there was no time to like kind of fiddle around with it. I think we were all running on a lot of adrenaline at that point. But yeah, they just sort of took charge and were like, okay, we're going to get everyone out of here.
And you guys were coming up on the stern of their boat. Like they pulled you up to the stern. Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Because it's too high. It's just, we're basically at the water line. And so the stern is the only place that they wouldn't have had to like lift us up.
Was it like a scoop stern? Like, what did they have, like an open?
Yeah, it was open
stern.
transom.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay, so I'm like imagining like my boat or something that has where that would be like probably one of the most dangerous places on my boat to pull someone in, but with an open transom, I guess it makes more sense. Even though it's still an intense place, like that's bouncing up and down in those waves. But wow. Yeah. Okay. So everyone's getting like yanked on board one by one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And they had someone on board who was taking down the names, making sure everyone was there who was supposed to be there.
That's great.
Yeah, and we had like a little team meeting at that point. There was another boat that had also diverted to help us called Banter, and Banter is actually owned by friends of ours who have raced on Alliance. Lindsay Gimple, who I'd mentioned before, it's her parents' boat, and so it was her and her sister Megan and their family, and we've all raced with them a lot, and we're very good friends with them. And the plan was that originally half of our crew was going to transfer to their boat because we were taking 9 people and putting them on a boat that already had 7 people on it. And so we were more than doubling their crew, which is a pretty insane ask of them. And so we were going to take half of the Alliance people and put them on Banter. But when we had popped the tube on the life raft, there was kind of this moment of like, well, what do we do now? And one of the guys on Kaylee, RJ, he was like, we're not putting anyone back in that life raft. It's not happening. Nobody's going back in the life raft. Sorry, you're stuck here. And it was a sort of like moment of like very clear-headedness of like, listen, I know it sucks, but like, this is what we're doing. Yeah. And he was absolutely right. It was the right call. But it was really tough because we had just been through like this whole ordeal and our friends were so close by and we couldn't even say hi to them. And
it would have been comforting to see some familiar
friendly faces
too.
at that point.
Yeah. And then you're what, 15 of you, 16 of you?
16 of us, yeah.
On this 120, like a 30-foot boat basically, right?
It was like 40.
40,
It's a J121. But it was not a lot of living space, and nobody had showered in 3 days, and nobody had toothbrushes or, any of their personal hygiene things, and nobody had a change of clothes. I mean, it was definitely...
right, and you've all just been through this, like, very intense traumatic experience,
Yeah. And there's this section in the Safety at Sea course that's, like, how to be a good victim, and it's about how to help people find you if you go overboard. But I think they need to add, like, a part 2 to that that's, like, if you're putting a bunch of, like, maybe traumatized, exhausted, soaking wet people onto a boat that doesn't have enough space for it, like, how do you stay out of those people's way while they're still trying to sail their boat and trying to get it back to shore? Like, how do you keep it all bottled up for, like, however long it takes to get back? Because I think there were a lot of, like, there was a while that I think everyone was kind of just full of adrenaline, and there wasn't a lot of, like, upset people on the boat while we were trying. I mean, obviously everybody was, like, deeply shaken by what happened, but there was a lot of gallows humor. There was a lot of sort of stoicism on the way back, but there wasn't a lot of people who were like upset and freaking out. And I think, you know, managing your emotions and finding a way to either be useful or be out of the way while someone's performing that rescue and finishing their race or whatever it is that they're doing at that point. I think we don't really talk about that. There's no way to really mentally prepare for that situation, but we were on that boat for 52 hours and it was a really long 52 hours.
Yeah. Like, I guess, I think you put it, you posted something about that and you wrote something like, the challenges that extend beyond the accident. And I think like when you talk about rescuing a crew that fell overboard, like something that we always try to emphasize in that training is the aftercare too. It's like, yes, you want to pick them up, you want to get them from the water onto the boat, but once they're back on the boat, you're not done. Like, you're not like, we did the drill, they're back on board. Like, woohoo, like there's all this, there's all this, like, there's medical stuff, there's emotional stuff, there's like, and adding to that, like that you guys are all getting onto another boat and more than doubling their crew is like a whole other piece. So I guess what did you learn from that? What would,
It's tough because I think there were so many people who really stepped up at that time, both on Alliance's crew and on Kaylee's crew, who really, you know, made what could have been a really dangerous situation or potentially, you know, leading to a tragedy into something that everyone walked away from it uninjured, which is just incredible that nobody got hurt in the whole procedure. But I think one of the things I've been thinking about a lot is that, like, when it comes to something unexpected that happens on the boat, I think knowing your team well is one of the most important safety factors there, and having that trust with them is just so critical. And I know a lot of people hop on boats, and I do it all the time. You know, you hop on boats with people you don't know because they have a cool boat or they're doing a race that you want to do or something like that. But I think it would have been a really bad situation potentially if we had 9 people who had never sailed together before on that boat in that same circumstance. And I think because we knew each other very well, in some instances we knew how to take care of each other, and we also knew when to leave each other alone. And you know, I think having that support and having those familiar faces to kind of like look over and check in with was really important in that moment. I think you sort of have to be a master of yourself as well. Like you have to be aware of like your position as like one person in an ecosystem of way too many people in a small space, and trying to be courteous and out of the way to these people who have sacrificed their race and also their comfort and also, you know, their provisions or their clothing or, you know, all these generous things that they had done for us. And I think it's just tough to have to be like on display for 2 days after having it's something like that happen. Like, I think for me, I just wanted to be alone.
There's nowhere to go. Well, I saw some photo where there were like 4 of you sleeping or and on the floor, like the
there are
cabin
actually
soul.
7 people in that photo.
Oh my God.
It's 4 on the floor, and then there's some in the berths on the side. Everybody's sort of just in this big pile together. I mean, there wasn't space to like really move around. There wasn't space to like you know, look after the sails in there. Anytime somebody needed to go forward to get their gear, they're stepping on people. And
oh my gosh. What do you do? Like you said, like, you know, you need to sort of take care of yourself or like be able to like, manage your emotions and manage yourself while you're like in other people's space, surrounded by tons of people. Everyone's processing this intense thing, or probably not really processing it because you're just like in survival mode still. But what happens? Like, what do you do mentally in that time to like get through it, I guess? Like, are you just kind of like, don't think about it, or are you like talking to each other about it?
It's funny because I think of the 9 of us, we all probably dealt with that slightly differently. I know there are some people who just like disassociated and were just kind of like a shell for 2 days. There are some people who were very high energy throughout the whole thing, just kind of maybe still running on that adrenaline buzz, and different people really had different responses to it. I get quite seasick out there, and I hadn't taken any meds, I think, once I had gotten on Kaylee. And so a lot of it was just kind of trying to manage the seasickness first and foremost. And I was like, okay, I have a job. Like, that's what I'm going to worry about. And because I was, you know, thinking about that, I wasn't thinking about some of the other things maybe. And we kind of kept our watch schedule in an informal way, but we always had people that were in and out of the boat because there just wasn't enough space for everyone to be sleeping at the same time. But also, it was something to do. It sounds funny like because you think of like being on the rail as not doing anything sometimes, but we went from a team that has some competitive people on it, and we wanted to do well, and we were like had been planning for a year to do this race, and then all of a sudden, in like the blink of an eye, we were still on a boat and still racing, but suddenly not allowed to touch anything. And it was a very weird, like, you know, what do you do? I think we all wanted to be racing still. And
why couldn't you? Was that like a crew, like a decision by the other team? Was that like a racing rules thing? Like why?
Yeah. So I think my understanding, and I don't know officially what the call would have been on this because we didn't need to ask in the redress hearing, but my understanding is that if we had been involved with sailing their boat, they wouldn't have been able to file for redress and potentially get some of the time back on their score at the end. So they actually continued racing and then filed for that redress and got some time back, and then came in third in their class because of that, even with all of us on board. Yeah. And I think we wanted to be it was like one thing that we could do to not impact and we were impacting the race in such a huge way. We were such a huge inconvenience to them. But in not getting involved with that, they were able to file for redress.
Right. And get time back on their time for the time it took to go rescue you guys.
The time it took so it was the time it took to go rescue us, and then a certain percentage on their polars.
Right, because they had 9 more people.
Because they had, the extra. So, and they were given back, you know, I think a fair amount for what they had done.
That's that's so many, I don't know, that's so many pieces at once. That's like from a leadership standpoint, like just like a crazy number of factors and people and emotions, and they're sailing the boat and they're thinking about weather, and you know, you all are on board and they have to keep you all alive and like want to make sure you're all okay, and like and a leader. I was thinking about this when you mentioned like just the staying out of the way portion and realizing you're just one person. Like there's a leadership lesson there in not taking up too much space, or in like not everyone is going to be a captain right now. Like a bunch of people have to go take a back seat, or like and I think, you know, at that point we had all, I mean, it wasn't easy for them to get to us, and they were exhausted as well, and a J121 is a pretty wet boat, and sitting on the rail is like pretty soggy, and we didn't have any changes of clothes, and they were offering us, you know, their spare clothes, their fowlies, their, you know, their provisions. We had brought some things with us, but, you know, not enough for 9 people for 2 days. And they were extraordinarily generous with us, and, you know, did everything they could to sort of make sure that, you know, we were okay in that situation. And so many of them stepped up in so many like little ways and found little human comforts for us. And that was, we're just like extraordinarily grateful for everything they did for us. But it definitely was sort of a puzzle at points of like, well, what is the best thing for me to do? And is there anything that I can do at this point that's more helpful? Because lying on the floor does not seem helpful. And especially when they're exhausted, and, you know, some of them would have liked to have a couple more hours to sleep in between their watches. And if we'd been able to step in, you know, that could have happened. But, it's a very unique situation to be doing a rescue while you're still racing. Right. And that was a choice too, to continue racing, you know, like seemed to work out. They got third place, like, you know, but that is another decision that, that someone had to make.
Yeah.
Wow. I want to, it's like we've been talking for more than an hour. So I want to, which of course, you know, like we could keep talking, but is there anything else about this experience? And I know it, you know, it hasn't even been 2 months yet, probably, since this happened. So it's still relatively fresh, but is there anything about this experience that I don't know, anything else that you want to say, or anything else that, like, I don't know, you learned from it or want other people to know, I guess, about it?
I think part of the reason that we were able to act so calmly and without the panic and without any of the additional dangers or injuries or anything else that could have happened in that situation was preparedness. And I know people talk about it all the time, and I know it's not the most fun topic, but our team got together every month during the off season to do a Zoom call that had like a pop quiz in it on, you know, several hours worth of homework that we were watching. There were weather briefings and course briefings and all sorts of different things. And I think the race requirement is that you have to have at least a third of your crew having had their safety at sea courses and have their certification. But I believe everyone on our crew had their safety at sea certification.
Cool.
So we on the boat had gone well above the minimum for all of these different things for safety and preparedness. And I think it could have been a much worse situation if our boat hadn't been a very intentionally prepared program. You know, I think the boat owners went out of their way to set up their program that way. And I hate to phrase it like this, but you know, it couldn't have happened to a better boat. I don't believe there was a single boat in that fleet that could have had a better and safer and better executed rescue because of that. And it's really to the credit of the people in charge on that boat.
No, that's good. And it is a good, I don't know, it is a good, like these kinds of sea stories where it's like, yeah, something did go wrong. But then, I don't know, it sounds like pretty much every step of the way after the initial thing went wrong, which was hitting something which you can't plan for and you can't avoid, and no one sees that coming. Yeah, it sounds like everything went sort of as well as it could after that.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know, there's so many points that I think could have turned a textbook rescue into a disaster, and we were able to avoid them and all get home safely. And I think that just a testament to the seamanship of the people that run that program and all the people that they had selected to come on that race with us. So really appreciate them. Really appreciate Kaylee and all of the sailors on Kaylee for everything that they did for us. It was a really humbling experience. There was two of the guys on Kaylee, once we got there, they kind of looked at me and they were like, "Oh, you look familiar." And they follow me on Instagram. And I was like, this is the most embarrassing moment of my life. It's one thing to be shipwrecked, but to lose your boat and then be recognized immediately from oh.
That's so funny. They're like, a celebrity sighting,
so
and you're so unshowered,
yeah, exactly. I'm soaked. I'm disgusting.
That's so funny.
Whoops.
But still being recognized. So there you go.
Yay.
Oh, that's so funny. I guess I want to end by asking, clearly this experience didn't deter you completely from, and it went really well, but it sounds like you're still you're working towards this goal that started 10 years ago now of being an onboard reporter, and you're on that path. What's happening next for you? Are you looking for more offshore sailing or more onboard reporter experiences? What's
I've always been someone who will take any opportunity that I can get to go offshore. I think at the moment I'm glad to be onshore for a little while. I think I need a little bit of a break, but I don't think this is by any means slowing me down. I think I just need to get my head on straight a little bit after all of that. But
Of course,
I would be shocked if this was the last Newport Bermuda for anyone on our crew. I think we're all, we left something on the table. We have something to prove. And I think, we'll all be back in some capacity. And for me personally, I think my goals are all still the same. I think it would be really cool to work with some bigger campaigns, maybe as a shore support person while we're, kind of doing things. I love my job at Sail, and I really, want to keep doing that as well. And there's sort of so many interesting opportunities out there right now. And so I don't really know what's next, but yeah, there's whatever it is, it's going to be a lot of writing in sailboats and holding a camera, and that suits me just
Sounds
fine.
pretty good. That's a nice combo. Yeah, you've found such a sweet spot. I also wanted to ask you, I guess this can be the last question. Mm-hmm. What do you like about telling sailing stories?
Oh, I think I like stories in general. I think there's something so connecting about storytelling that, brings us together, and it helps us see humanity in other people that maybe we wouldn't think that we had anything in common with. And I think being out at sea is an inherently adventurous thing, and it's an inherently quite raw thing. I don't think anyone's out there being a particularly fake version of, I think people get to be this very, very stripped back version of themselves out there. And the survival stories, even if everything goes right, there's always going to be some sort of adventure happening out there. And I think I just love the drama of it. I love the sort of human spirit of it. There's something so audacious about being such a small person in such a fallible boat up against the big ocean. And I don't know. I think there's something magical about telling those stories.
Yeah, that was really well said. I'm glad I asked.
Thank you.
There's some quote. I don't know if it's a real quote, but there's something I feel like I've heard or read over and over in sailing that's you can't pretend to be anybody else when you're at sea, which I think, I feel like feels true, especially after a certain number of days, especially being offshore. That you're there's no hiding.
Yeah. And it's a very focused thing out there, especially when you're in a watch schedule, and your whole life is the boat and running the boat and helping the people around you to run the boat. And it's just such a simple, there's so many complex things that need to happen, but it's such a simple existence. It's all of your energy is on those few list of tasks that need to get done. And I think in regular life, we don't get opportunities to have that simplicity. There's always another email in your inbox. There's always another text or message or, whatever it is that needs your attention. And I think the opportunity to just have that little crucible of life in the big ocean is really special. And it's one of the things I love most about being out there, for sure.
This episode was sponsored by The Quarterdeck, 59 North's home port on the internet for all things sailing and seamanship. Go to 59-north.com/quarterdeck to sign up for your 2-week free trial. See you there.
On the Wind is the podcast about sailing, created by 59 Degrees North and hosted by me, Emma Garshagen, August Sandberg, and Andy Schell. The show is mixed and produced in Maryland by Lee Cumberland. Episode artwork and website show notes are done by Laura Parent in San Francisco. The intro theme music was written and performed by former podcast guest Cameron Dale. And the outro music that you're hearing now is by our friends at Stormweather Shanty Choir, who have also been on the show. We love hearing from you, so please send us a note at holdfast@59-north.com. And you can also help us out a lot by reviewing the show on iTunes. It really does help. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, hold fast.
And when me money was all gone on liquor and the horse, I made up me mind that I was inclined to go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. I made up me mind that I was inclined to go to sea no more. As I was walking down the street, I met sweet Angeline. She said, come home with me, me lad, and we'll have a cracking time. But when I awoke, it was no joke. I found I was all alone. My silver watch and my money too, and my whole bloody gear was gone. Was gone, was gone. My whole bloody gear was gone. It was when I awoke, it was no joke, for my whole bloody gear was gone. As I was walking down the street, I met Big Rapper Brown. I asked him if he would take me in, and he looked at me with a frown. He said,
last time you was paid up with me, you took up no score. But I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea once more.
once more, once more, to go to sea once more. I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea once more. Sometimes we're catching whales, me lads, but mostly we get none. With a 20-foot oar in every paw from 5 o'clock in the morn. And when daylight's gone and the night's coming on, we rest upon our oars. And oh boys, you wish that you was dead or snug with the girls ashore. Ashore, ashore, or snug with the girls ashore. Oh boys, you wish that you was dead or snug with the girls ashore. Come all you seafaring lads that listen to me song. When you go a big boating, boys, make sure you do not go wrong. You take my tip when you come off a trip, don't go with any whores. But get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. Get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. Get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more.